Blackwell Restored. Lady Catherine of Dunmere had once trusted Sir Tristan de Clare with her life until she saw him standing beside her father's murderer. Now, as he caught her by the wrist in the dark corridors of the castle, his voice was rough with something close to regret. "You think I have betrayed you," he murmured. "But tell me, my lady, do you truly know what betrayal is?" Chapter 1. The Serpent's Kiss. The chill of Dunmere Castle had seeped into Lady Catherine's bones, a cold that mirrored the ice in her heart. 5 years. 5 years since she had last seen him, since the flickering torchlight had illuminated the blood on his hands, the steel of his sword, the chillingly blank expression on the face of Sir Tristan de Clare. 5 years since he had stood, unmoving, beside Lord Elmsworth, the man who had plunged a dagger into her father's heart. Tonight, however, the past was a phantom no longer. He was here, in Dunmere, a guest, a mockery of the word of her brother, Baron Thomas. Thomas, ever eager to please the new king, had invited half the realm to this feast, a celebration of the king's recent victory over the northern rebels. And among those invited, a serpent had slithered into their midst. Catherine had seen him across the great hall, his presence a discordant note in the forced merriment. He hadn't changed much. Still the same dark, arresting features, the same broad shoulders that spoke of strength honed in battle, the same eyes, the color of a stormy sea, that had once held such warmth, such devotion. Now, they held only a guarded coolness, a wall she could not breach. She had retreated, seeking the solace of the familiar corridors, the cold stone a comfort against the burning humiliation that clawed at her throat. The feast, the music, the laughter, it all felt like a betrayal, a desecration of her father's memory. It was then, in the shadowed passage leading to the kitchens, that he found her. He moved with the grace of a predator, silent and swift, until he was blocking her path, his tall frame filling the narrow space. "Lady Catherine," he said, his voice low, a rumble that sent shivers down her spine, not of fear, but of a treacherous, unwelcome familiarity. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with a defiance she didn't entirely feel. "Sir Tristan." An unexpected pleasure. The words were laced with ice, each syllable a tiny shard aimed at his heart. He didn't flinch. He merely inclined his head, a gesture that could have been respect or mockery. She couldn't tell. "I understand my presence here is uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Her voice rose, a tremor of barely suppressed fury shaking her. "You stand in the hall of the man whose blood stains your hands, and you call it uncomfortable?" He caught her by the wrist then, his grip firm but not painful, his fingers surprisingly warm against her chilled skin. The sudden contact, the unexpected heat, sent a jolt through her, a wave of confusion that momentarily drowned out her anger. "You think I have betrayed you," he murmured, his gaze holding hers, intense and unwavering. The torchlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on his face, making it difficult to read his expression. "But tell me, my lady, do you truly know what betrayal is?" His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Betrayal. The word echoed the ache in her heart, the constant, gnawing pain of loss and unanswered questions. She had trusted him, once. Trusted him with her secrets, her hopes, the fragile beginnings of a love that had bloomed in stolen moments, whispered words in the moonlit gardens of Dunmere. She remembered the feel of his hand in hers, the way his eyes had crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the stories he had told her of his travels, his battles, his dreams of a peaceful future. A future they had planned, together, in hushed whispers, a future that had been shattered in a single, bloody night. "I saw you," she whispered, the words raw with remembered pain. "I saw you standing there, beside Elmsworth, while my father—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The image was still too vivid, too brutal. His grip tightened slightly on her wrist. "You saw what you believed you saw, Catherine." There was a hint of desperation in his voice, a plea for understanding that she refused to acknowledge. "And what am I supposed to believe now?" she challenged, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and a deep, buried sorrow. "That you were merely a bystander?" That you had no part in it? He released her wrist, his hand falling to his side. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the flickering torchlight. There are things you do not know, Catherine. Things I cannot explain. Cannot or will not. He turned back to her, his eyes dark and troubled. Both, perhaps. But know this, Catherine, I did not kill your father. I would never have harmed him. The sincerity in his voice, the raw emotion in his eyes, shook her. For a moment, a sliver of doubt pierced the armor of her grief and anger. Could she have been wrong? Could there be more to the story than she knew? But then, the image of that night returned, vivid and cruel, and the doubt was swept away by a tide of bitterness. You expect me to believe that? After what I saw, I expect nothing, he said quietly. But I ask you to listen. Not now, perhaps, but someday. The truth is more complicated than you can imagine. He stepped back, allowing her to pass. She hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and a desperate, almost forgotten yearning to understand. But pride and the weight of 5 years of grief won out. She brushed past him, her skirts rustling against the stone floor, her heart a cold, heavy weight in her chest. As she walked away, she could feel his gaze on her back, a silent plea that echoed in the empty corridor. She didn't look back. She couldn't. To do so would be to acknowledge the flicker of hope, the treacherous seed of doubt that he had planted in her heart. And that, she knew, was a betrayal she could not afford. The serpent had offered his kiss, and she would not be swayed. At least not yet. The night was young, and Dunmere held many shadows. Chapter 2. Shadows of Dunmere. The feast continued, a swirling vortex of color and sound that Catherine navigated with a practiced detachment. She moved among the guests, exchanging polite greetings, offering smiles that never reached her eyes, her mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Tristan's words, his unsettling claim of innocence, replayed in her mind, a discordant melody against the backdrop of forced gaiety. She found herself observing him, discreetly, from across the hall. He stood with a group of knights, their conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter, but his gaze seemed distant, his attention elsewhere. He looked isolated, despite the company he kept. A pang of something she refused to name as sympathy touched her heart. Her brother, Thomas, approached, his face flushed with wine and good cheer. He was a stout man, with their father's build but none of his quiet strength. He had always been easily swayed, eager to please, a trait that had made him vulnerable to the machinations of court. "Catherine, my dear sister," he boomed, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "You are not enjoying yourself? You have barely touched your food." She forced a smile. "The evening is overwhelming, brother. So many guests." He chuckled. "Indeed. But a necessary evil, I'm afraid. The king favors those who show him loyalty, and what better way than to host a feast in his honor?" Catherine suppressed a sigh. Thomas's ambition was as transparent as it was tiresome. He craved the king's favor, the power and prestige that came with it, and he would do anything to secure it. Even, it seemed, invite the man Catherine believed responsible for their father's death. "And Sir Tristan?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "How did he come to be among the king's favored guests?" Thomas shrugged. "He fought bravely in the Northern Campaign. Distinguished himself, apparently. The king holds him in high regard." "I see." Catherine felt a chill despite the warmth of the hall. So, Tristan had found redemption in war. He had traded one bloody act for another, and now he was hailed as a hero. The injustice of it stung. "He is a valuable ally," Thomas continued, oblivious to her inner turmoil. "A man of influence. It is wise to cultivate such connections." Catherine looked at her brother, a wave of disillusionment washing over her. He saw only Tristan's usefulness, his potential to advance Thomas's own ambitions. He had no regard for the past, for the pain that Tristan's presence caused her. "Of course, brother," she said quietly. "You are always so practical." She excused herself, leaving Thomas to his revelry. She needed air, space to think. She made her way to the castle gardens, a secluded haven where she had spent countless hours as a child, seeking refuge from the stifling confines of court life. The night air was cool and crisp, scented with the fragrance of late-blooming roses. The moon, a silver crescent in the inky sky, cast long, ethereal shadows across the manicured lawns. Catherine wrapped her shawl tighter around her, seeking warmth against the chill that seemed to emanate from the very stones of Dunmere. She sat on a stone bench, overlooking the moonlit landscape. The gardens were silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was here, in this very spot, that Tristan had first kissed her. The memory came unbidden, a wave of bittersweet longing washing over her. She had been 16, he 20. He had been a young knight then, full of fire and idealism, his eyes shining with a love that she had believed was as pure and unwavering as the stars above. They had met in secret, stealing moments together whenever they could, their love a forbidden flower blooming in the shadows of Dunmere. He had told her stories of his adventures, his dreams of a future where they could be together, free from the constraints of duty and family expectations. He had given her a locket, a small, silver heart containing a miniature portrait of him. She had worn it hidden beneath her gown, a secret talisman of their love. She hadn't looked at it in 5 years. It was locked away in a chest, buried beneath layers of silk and velvet, a relic of a past she had tried to forget. But tonight, the memories were too strong, too vivid to ignore. She closed her eyes, and she could almost feel his arms around her, his lips on hers, the whispered promises of a love that had seemed eternal. A sound, a soft footfall on the gravel path, startled her. She opened her eyes, her heart pounding, and saw him standing there, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice low and husky. She stood up, her hands clenched at her sides. "What do you want, Sir Tristan?" He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I want you to understand." "Understand what?" "That you betrayed me. Betrayed my family?" "I betrayed no one, Catherine." "I swear it." "Then explain what I saw. Explain why you stood beside Elmsworth while he murdered my father." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I cannot. Not yet." "Then there is nothing more to say." She turned to leave, but he caught her arm, his grip gentle but firm. "Please, Catherine, give me a chance. Let me prove to you that I am not the man you think I am." She looked at him, her heart torn between anger and a desperate, lingering hope. She wanted to believe him, to believe that the man she had loved, the man who had held her heart in his hands, was not a monster. But the evidence, the memory of that night, was too strong, too damning. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I am asking it nonetheless. Give me time, Catherine. Give me a chance to earn back your trust." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The touch, so unexpected, so tender, sent a shiver through her. She closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "I will try," she whispered, the words barely audible. He smiled then, a faint, tentative smile that reached his eyes, a glimmer of the man she had once known. "That is all I ask." He released her, and she stepped back, her heart pounding, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. The shadows of Dunmere seemed to deepen around them, secrets and lies swirling in the moonlit air. She had given him a sliver of hope, a fragile thread of trust. But she knew, deep down, that the path to redemption, for both of them, would be long and arduous, fraught with danger and uncertainty. The serpent had kissed her again, and this time, she wasn't sure if she could resist its venom, or if she even wanted to. The castle loomed, a silent witness to their fragile truce. Chapter 3. A Knight's Confession. The following days passed in a haze of strained politeness and veiled glances. Tristan remained at Dunmere, a constant, unsettling presence. He made no further attempts to speak to Catherine alone, but she felt his eyes on her, a silent observation that both unnerved and intrigued her. She found herself drawn to him, against her better judgment. She would catch glimpses of him in the courtyard, practicing swordplay with the other knights, his movements fluid and powerful, his body a testament to years of training. She would see him in the chapel, kneeling in prayer, his head bowed, his expression unreadable. And she would wonder, again and again, what secrets he held, what drove him, what had truly happened that night 5 years ago. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the library, a vast, echoing chamber filled with ancient tomes and dusty scrolls. The room was her father's sanctuary, a place where he had spent countless hours immersed in learning and contemplation. She had avoided it since his death, the memories too painful to bear. But today, she felt drawn to it, seeking a connection to the man she had lost. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, her touch lingering on the worn leather and faded gold lettering. She pulled a volume from the shelf, a collection of ancient ballads, and sat down at a large oak table, her gaze drifting to the window, overlooking the castle courtyard. It was then that she saw him. Tristan was standing alone, beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree, his gaze fixed on the distant hills. He looked lost, his shoulders slumped, his usual air of confidence gone. An impulse, a sudden urge to speak to him, to understand him, overcame her. She rose from her chair, her heart pounding, and made her way out of the library, down the winding staircase, and into the courtyard. He didn't see her approach until she was almost upon him. He turned, his eyes widening in surprise. "Lady Catherine," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Sir Tristan," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "May I speak with you?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." They walked together, in silence, to a secluded corner of the courtyard, far from the prying eyes of the castle inhabitants. "You said you wanted me to understand," Catherine began, her voice trembling slightly. "You said there were things I did not know." He nodded, his gaze fixed on hers. "There are." "Then tell me," she pleaded. "Tell me what happened that night. Tell me why you were there, with Elmsworth." He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own. "It is a long story, Catherine, and a complicated one. I have time," she said quietly. He began to speak, his voice low and hesitant at first, then gaining strength as he recounted the events of that fateful night. He spoke of his loyalty to the former king, a loyalty that had been tested by the king's increasingly erratic behavior. He spoke of Elmsworth's plot to overthrow the king, a plot that Tristan had discovered only hours before it was to be carried out. "I tried to warn your father," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I knew he was loyal to the king, but I also knew he was a man of honor. I believed he would help me stop Elmsworth." He paused, his gaze dropping to the ground. "But I was too late. When I arrived at your father's chambers, Elmsworth was already there. He had already done it." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered the scene, the blood, the horror, the look of betrayal on her father's face. "And you just stood there?" she whispered. "I was in shock," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know what to do. Elmsworth threatened to implicate me in the murder if I didn't cooperate. So you chose to save yourself?" Catherine's voice was filled with bitterness. "No," he said fiercely. "I chose to survive. I knew that if I was killed, there would be no one to expose Elmsworth, no one to avenge your father's death." He looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I made a deal with Elmsworth. I agreed to remain silent, to pretend to be his ally, in exchange for his promise that he would not harm your family. I knew it was a dangerous game, but I believed it was the only way to protect you, to protect your brother." Catherine stared at him, her mind reeling. His story was plausible. It explained his presence at Elmsworth's side, his silence, his apparent betrayal. But could she trust him? Could she believe that the man she had loved, the man she had believed to be a murderer, was actually a hero in disguise? "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why wait 5 years?" "I couldn't," he said. "Elmsworth had spies everywhere. He would have killed me killed your family if he had known I had revealed the truth.
And now? She asked.
What has changed? Elmsworth is dead, he said quietly. He was killed in the Northern Campaign. The threat is gone. Catherine felt a wave of relief, followed by a surge of anger. So, you waited until it was safe for you to reveal the truth?
No, he said.
I waited until it was safe for everyone. I had to be sure that Elmsworth's allies were no longer a threat. I had to be sure that I could protect you. He reached out and took her hand, his grip gentle but firm. Catherine, I know I have hurt you. I know I have betrayed your trust. But I swear to you on my honor as a knight that I have never lied to you about my feelings. I loved you then, and he hesitated, his gaze searching hers. And I still care for you, deeply. Catherine's heart ached. She wanted to believe him, to believe in the love that had once blossomed between them. But the scars of the past were deep, and the doubts lingered. The confession hung between, a fragile bridge across a chasm of pain. The castle walls seemed to lean in, listening. Chapter 4. The Price of Loyalty. Catherine pulled her hand away, a knot of confusion tightening in her chest. His words, his confession, echoed in her mind, a stark contrast to the image she had carried for 5 years. Could she believe him? Could she afford not to? Your loyalty, she said, her voice laced with a skepticism she couldn't quite mask, seems to shift with the tides, Sir Tristan. First to the old king, then to Elmsworth, and now to whom? He flinched, as if struck. My loyalty has always been to the truth, Catherine, and to those I care for. And yet, you remained silent for 5 years. You allowed me to believe you were a murderer. I did what I had to do to survive, to protect you and your family. I made a choice, a difficult one, and I lived with the consequences. His voice was rough with a pain that seemed genuine, a pain that resonated with her own. A choice that cost me dearly, she whispered, the memory of her father's death, the years of grief and anger, flooding back. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers.
I know.
And I am deeply sorry for that. I would give anything to undo the past, to erase the pain I have caused you. But you cannot, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The past is the past, and it cannot be undone. No, he agreed. But it can be redeemed, perhaps, if you will allow it. She looked at him, her heart torn. She wanted to believe him, to believe in the possibility of redemption, of healing. But the fear, the doubt, the ingrained mistrust, held her back. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. I need time. Time to think, to process all of this. He nodded, his expression understanding. I understand. I will give you all the time you need. He paused, then added, but know this, Catherine. I will not rest until I have proven my innocence to you, until I have earned back your trust. Even if it takes a lifetime. His words, his unwavering gaze, sent a shiver through her. She saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, the man of honor and integrity, the man who had captured her heart with his whispered promises and stolen kisses. There is something else, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Something you should know. Catherine raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. What is it? He glanced around, ensuring they were truly alone. The king's victory in the north, it was not as straightforward as it seems. There are whispers of treason, of alliances forged in the shadows. Catherine's eyes widened. What are you saying? I am saying that Elmsworth was not the only one plotting against the old king. There were others, powerful men, who are still at large. And they may be plotting against the new king as well. And you know who they are? He nodded. I have some suspicions. But I need proof. And that is where I need your help. Catherine stared at him, her mind racing. This was a dangerous game, a web of intrigue and betrayal that could cost them their lives. But it was also an opportunity to uncover the truth, to expose the remaining conspirators, to finally avenge her father's death. Why me? She asked. Why would you trust me with this? He smiled, a faint wry smile. Because you are your father's daughter. You are strong, intelligent, and you have a sense of justice that burns as brightly as his did. And because I trust you, despite everything." His words, his trust, touched her deeply. It was a gamble, a leap of faith, but she found herself drawn to it, compelled by a force she couldn't quite explain. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice firm, her resolve hardening. He outlined his plan, a daring and dangerous scheme to infiltrate the court, to gather information, to expose the conspirators. It would require her to play a role, to pretend to be his ally, to deceive those around her. It was a risk, a betrayal of sorts, but it was a betrayal for a greater good. It was a price she was willing to pay, for justice, for revenge, for the chance to finally put the past to rest. And, perhaps, for the chance to rediscover the love she had thought lost forever. The price of loyalty was high, but she was ready to pay it. The wind whispered through the courtyard, carrying secrets and promises. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Cloisters. Catherine's life at Dunmere transformed into a carefully choreographed dance of deception. By day, she played the part of the grieving sister, subtly encouraging Thomas's ambition and his growing closeness to Sir Tristan. By night, she and Tristan met in secret, usually in the abandoned cloisters of the old chapel, their hushed voices echoing among the crumbling arches and weathered statues of forgotten saints. The cloisters were a fitting setting for their clandestine meetings. Once a place of prayer and contemplation, they were now a testament to the passage of time, to the decay of faith and the enduring power of secrets. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient incense, a ghostly reminder of the monks who had once walked these very paths. Tristan had begun to share his suspicions with her, carefully piecing together fragments of information gathered from overheard conversations, intercepted letters, and subtle observations of the court's dynamics. He believed that a powerful faction, loyal to the old king's lineage, was secretly working to undermine the new king's rule, aiming to place a rival claimant on the throne. "The key," Tristan explained, his voice barely a whisper in the echoing silence, "is Lord Markham. He was a close advisor to the old king, and he has retained his position under the new regime. But I believe he is playing a double game." Catherine nodded, her mind racing. Lord Markham was a formidable figure, known for his sharp intellect and his ruthless ambition. He was also a close friend of her brother, Thomas, a fact that added another layer of complexity to their situation. "We need to find proof," Catherine said. "Something concrete that links Markham to the conspiracy." "And that is where you come in," Tristan replied, his eyes meeting hers. "You have access to Markham through your brother. You can observe him, listen to his conversations, perhaps even find evidence in his chambers." The thought of searching Markham's chambers sent a shiver of apprehension down Catherine's spine. It was a dangerous undertaking, one that could have dire consequences if she were caught. But she knew it was necessary. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "But I will need your help. I need to know what to look for." Tristan smiled, a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "You are braver than you know, Catherine." He proceeded to instruct her, detailing the types of documents, letters, or coded messages that might indicate Markham's involvement in the conspiracy. He taught her how to search discreetly, how to cover her tracks, how to avoid arousing suspicion. Their meetings in the cloisters became a ritual, a shared space of trust and danger. They would sit together on a cold stone bench, the flickering light of a single candle illuminating their faces, their whispers mingling with the ghostly echoes of the past. Catherine found herself drawn to Tristan, not just by the shared danger, but by the rediscovery of his intelligence, his strength, his unwavering commitment to justice. She began to see him, not as the betrayer she had believed him to be, but as the man she had once loved, the man who had risked everything to protect her. The walls she had built around her heart began to crumble, brick by brick, revealing the vulnerable, yearning woman beneath. One evening, as they were discussing their plans, Tristan reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm and reassuring, sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Catherine," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I know this is difficult for you, but I want you to know that I am here for you. Always." She looked at him, her own eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and a growing, undeniable affection. "I know," she whispered, "and I am starting to believe you." He squeezed her hand, his smile a beacon in the darkness. "That is all I ask." As the days turned into weeks, Catherine became more adept at her role. She learned to read the subtle cues, the unspoken messages, the hidden alliances that swirled beneath the surface of court life. She became a shadow, a silent observer, a gatherer of secrets. The whispers in the cloisters grew louder, the plot thickening, the danger escalating. But Catherine was no longer afraid. She had found a purpose, a renewed sense of self, a reason to fight. And she had found, once again, a reason to love. The cloisters, once a symbol of decay, were now a sanctuary of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The stones whispered secrets of their own, a silent encouragement. Chapter 6. The Falcon's Flight. Catherine discovered that Lord Markham kept a falcon, a magnificent peregrine named Shadow, housed in a mews at the edge of the castle grounds. The bird was his pride and joy, a symbol of his power and status. It also presented an opportunity. Tristan had learned that Markham sometimes used his falcon to carry messages, small, tightly rolled scrolls attached to the bird's leg. These messages, he suspected, contained coded communications with his fellow conspirators. "If we could intercept one of those messages," Tristan said, his voice low and urgent, "it could provide the proof we need." The task fell to Catherine. She had befriended Markham's falconer, a gruff, taciturn man named Osric, who had a deep love for the birds under his care. She had spent hours in the mews, observing Shadow, learning his habits, gaining Osric's trust. "He's a fierce one, that Shadow," Osric had said, a hint of pride in his voice. "But loyal to his master. Flies true, he does." Catherine had nodded, her mind racing. "He must be very well trained." Osric had agreed. "Takes years to train a peregrine. Patience, skill, and a bond between man and bird." That bond, Catherine realized, was the key. If she could somehow disrupt that bond, even for a brief moment, she might be able to intercept one of Shadow's messages. The opportunity came one blustery afternoon. Markham had sent Shadow on a flight, a message tied to his leg. Catherine, watching from the castle walls, saw the falcon soaring high above the surrounding fields, a dark speck against the gray sky. She made her way to the mews, her heart pounding. Osric was not there, having gone to the village on an errand. This was her chance. She entered the mews, the scent of feathers and bird droppings filling her nostrils. Shadow's perch was empty, but she knew he would return soon. She had brought with her a small piece of meat, laced with a potent herb that Tristan had obtained from the castle apothecary. The herb was harmless, but it would disorient the bird, causing it to land nearby rather than returning directly to the mews. As she waited, she heard the familiar cry of the falcon. She looked up and saw Shadow circling above, preparing to descend. She quickly placed the meat on a nearby post, then hid behind a stack of hay bales. Shadow landed on the post, his keen eyes fixed on the meat. He hesitated for a moment, then began to eat. Catherine watched, her breath held tight, as the herb took effect. The falcon became unsteady, his movements sluggish. He tried to take flight, but he faltered, landing clumsily on the ground. Catherine rushed forward, her hands trembling. She quickly removed the scroll from the falcon's leg, replacing it with a blank piece of parchment. She then coaxed the dazed bird back onto his perch, whispering soothing words. She slipped the scroll into her pocket, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and fear. She left the mews, her steps hurried, and made her way back to the castle, to the safety of her chambers. There, she unrolled the scroll, her hands shaking. The message was written in a complex code, a series of symbols and numbers that were meaningless to her. She knew she had to get it to Tristan as soon as possible. That evening, she met him in the cloisters, the scroll clutched tightly in her hand. He took it from her, his eyes shining with excitement. "You did it, Catherine," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You actually did it." He examined the scroll, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is a complex cipher," he said, "but I think I can break it."
It will take time, though.
They spent the next few hours poring over the scroll, Tristan working tirelessly to decipher the code. Catherine watched him, her admiration growing with each passing moment. He was not just a knight, a warrior. He was also a scholar, a man of intellect and determination. Finally, as the first rays of dawn began to filter through the cracks in the cloister walls, Tristan let out a cry of triumph. "I've got it," he exclaimed. "I've broken the code." He began to read the message aloud, his voice filled with a growing sense of urgency. The message revealed a detailed plan for an uprising against the king to take place within the month. Markham was the leader of the conspiracy, and he had secured the support of several other powerful lords. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. The plot was far more extensive, far more dangerous than they had imagined. "We have to warn the king," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes," Tristan agreed, "but we have to be careful. We cannot reveal our source. If Markham discovers that we have intercepted his message, he will know we are on to him." They knew they were walking a tightrope, balancing between exposing the truth and protecting themselves. The Falcon's flight had brought them the evidence they needed, but it had also placed them in mortal danger. The wind howled, mimicking the cry of a distant bird of prey. The hunt was on, but who was the hunter and who the hunted? Chapter 7. Beyond the castle walls. With a decoded message in hand, Tristan and Catherine knew they had to act swiftly, but discreetly. Openly accusing Lord Markham without irrefutable proof, and without revealing their methods, would be disastrous. It would alert the conspirators and likely lead to their own demise. "We need to take this directly to someone the king trusts implicitly," Tristan said, pacing the length of the cloister, the dim light catching the sharp angles of his face. "Someone beyond Markham's reach and influence." Catherine considered their options. The king's spymaster, Lord Elric? He has a reputation for being unyielding. Tristan shook his head. "Too close to court. Markham has ears everywhere. We need someone removed from the immediate circle, someone who can act independently." Catherine's mind drifted to an unlikely candidate, someone she hadn't seen in years. "My aunt, Abbess Eleanor. She resides at the Abbey of St. Seraphina, a day's ride from here. She was a close confidant of my father, and she holds no love for political games." Tristan stopped pacing, his eyes widening slightly. "An abbess? It's unconventional, but it might work. Abbeys are often seen as neutral ground, and they have their own networks of information. The Abbey of St. Seraphina was a secluded sanctuary, nestled in a valley beyond the rolling hills that surrounded Dunmere. It was known for its strict adherence to religious vows and its extensive library, a repository of ancient knowledge and sacred texts. Abbess Eleanor, Catherine's father's sister, had taken the veil after a tragic love affair, dedicating her life to God and to the pursuit of knowledge. She is wise and discerning, Catherine continued, and fiercely independent. If anyone can get this message to the king without alerting the conspirators, it is her. The journey to the abbey was fraught with peril. They couldn't travel openly, as Markham's spies were likely watching them. They had to slip away unnoticed, under the cover of darkness, and travel through the less traveled paths, avoiding the main roads. Under the cloak of a moonless night, cloaked and hooded, they stole horses. The stables were quiet, the stable hands asleep. They rode out, the only sound the muffled thud of hooves on the soft earth. The ride was arduous, the landscape unfamiliar and treacherous. They navigated by the stars, relying on Tristan's knowledge of the terrain and Catherine's memory of childhood visits to her aunt. They encountered few travelers, mostly shepherds and farmers, who paid them little heed. As dawn broke, painting the eastern sky with hues of pink and gold, they reached the outskirts of the valley where the abbey was nestled. The sight of the abbey, its gray stone walls rising majestically from the mist-covered valley, filled Catherine with a sense of peace and hope. They approached the abbey gates, their horses weary, their bodies aching from the long ride. A young nun, her face pale and serene, greeted them at the gate. "We seek audience with Abbess Eleanor," Catherine said, her voice hoarse from the journey. "Tell her it is Lady Catherine of Dunmere, her niece." The nun bowed her head. "I will inform the abbess. Please wait here." They waited in the courtyard, the silence broken only by the chirping of birds and the distant chanting of the nuns. Catherine felt a sense of calm wash over her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. The abbey was a sanctuary, a refuge from the storms of the outside world. Finally, the nun returned, her face composed. "The abbess will see you now. Follow me." They were led through the cloisters, the air cool and still, the scent of incense and old stone filling their nostrils. They reached a large oak door, intricately carved with scenes from the life of Saint Seraphina. The nun knocked softly, then opened the door, ushering them inside. Abbess Eleanor stood by a large window, overlooking the abbey gardens. She was a tall, imposing woman, her gray hair pulled back severely, her face etched with the lines of time and wisdom. She turned as they entered, her eyes, the same striking blue as Catherine's, widening in surprise. "Catherine," she said, her voice a low, melodious murmur. "What brings you here, child? And Sir Tristan?" Her gaze shifted to Tristan, her expression questioning. Catherine stepped forward, her heart filled with a mix of relief and apprehension. "Anne Eleanor, we need your help. We have uncovered a plot against the king, and we need to get this message to him." She handed her aunt the decoded scroll, her hand trembling. Abbess Eleanor took it, her eyes scanning the words, her expression growing increasingly grave. The fate of kingdoms rested on the choices made beyond Dunmere's walls, in this quiet sanctuary. The wind carried the faint sound of prayers, a plea for guidance and protection. Chapter 8. Scars of the Past. Abbess Eleanor listened intently as Catherine and Tristan recounted their story, the deciphered message laid out on the table before them, a stark testament to the treachery brewing within the kingdom. Her face, usually serene, was etched with concern, her keen eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "This is grave news indeed," she said, her voice low and measured. "Lord Markham is a dangerous man, and his influence reaches far. We must act swiftly, but cautiously." She turned to Catherine, her gaze softening. "You have been brave, child, braver than you know. But this is a dangerous path you have chosen." Catherine met her aunt's gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I know, aunt, but I could not stand idly by while my father's murderers plotted against the king." Abbess Eleanor nodded, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Your father would be proud of you, Catherine. He always said you had his spirit, his sense of justice." She turned to Tristan, her expression more guarded. "And you, Sir Tristan, you have a shadowed past, a reputation stained by accusations." Tristan met her gaze unflinchingly. "I know, Abbess, but I swear to you, I am innocent of the crimes I have been accused of. I have dedicated my life to serving the truth, to protecting the innocent." Abbess Eleanor studied him for a long moment, her eyes piercing. "I believe you," she said finally. "I see the truth in your eyes, the pain of a man wrongly accused." She paused, then added, "But trust is earned, Sir Tristan, not given freely. You must prove yourself worthy of it." Tristan bowed his head. "I understand, Abbess. And I will." Abbess Eleanor outlined her plan. She would send a trusted messenger, a lay brother known for his discretion and his swift horsemanship, to deliver the message directly to the king. The messenger would travel under the guise of a pilgrim, avoiding the main roads and attracting no unwanted attention.
"He will leave at dawn," she said.
"And he will carry your message, along with my own endorsement, to the king." She turned to Catherine and Tristan. "You must remain here, at the abbey, until we hear word from the king. It is too dangerous for you to return to Dunmere, not until Markham is dealt with." Catherine and Tristan agreed. The abbey offered them sanctuary, a temporary respite from the dangers of the outside world. The following days were filled with a tense anticipation. Catherine and Tristan spent their time exploring the abbey grounds, finding solace in the peaceful gardens and the ancient library. They spoke little of the plot, the danger that still loomed, focusing instead on sharing stories of their past, their hopes for the future. One afternoon, as they were walking through the Abbey's herb garden, Catherine paused, her hand brushing against a patch of rosemary. "This scent," she said, her voice soft, "reminds me of my mother. She used to grow rosemary in her garden at Dunmere." Tristan nodded. "I remember your mother. She was a kind and gentle woman." Catherine smiled sadly. "She died when I was young. I barely remember her, but I remember the scent of her garden, the way she used to sing to me." She paused, then added, "I often wonder what she would think of me now, of the choices I have made." Tristan reached out and gently touched her arm. "She would be proud of you, Catherine. You are strong, resilient, and you have a good heart." His words, his touch, sent a warmth through her, a comfort she hadn't realized she craved. She looked at him, her eyes meeting his, and saw a tenderness there, a vulnerability that mirrored her own. I haven't always been strong," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "After my father's death, I felt lost. I blamed you, I hated you, and I let that anger consume me." He nodded, his expression understanding. "I know, and I deserved your anger, your hatred. But I was wrong," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You were not the monster I believed you to be. You were a victim just as I was." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "We both carry scars, Catherine. Scars from the past, scars that may never fully heal. But perhaps we can help each other heal." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the lines of her cheekbones. His touch was feather-light, yet it sent shivers through her. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her heart aching with a longing she had tried to suppress for so long. He leaned down and kissed her, softly at first, then with a growing intensity. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of understanding, of a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, more resilient. As they stood there, embraced in the fragrant stillness of the herb garden, the scars of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a glimmer of hope, a promise of a future they could build together. The Abbey bells chimed, a melodic backdrop to their newfound peace. The past was a ghost, but the future was theirs to shape. Chapter 9. The Tournament of Treachery. Word arrived from the king, delivered by a royal messenger, his horse lathered and his face grim. The king had read Abbess Eleanor's message and Tristan's decoded evidence, and he was taking action. He had ordered Lord Markham's arrest, along with the other conspirators named in the scroll. But the king also requested Tristan's presence at court, to provide further testimony and to assist in uncovering any remaining threads of the conspiracy. He also, surprisingly, extended an invitation to Lady Catherine, recognizing her role in uncovering the plot. "He wishes to honor your bravery," the messenger explained, handing Catherine a sealed letter bearing the royal crest. Tristan and Catherine exchanged a look of both relief and apprehension. The immediate danger was over, but the game was not yet finished. They would have to face Markham, face the court, face the consequences of their actions. They returned to Dunmere, no longer fugitives, but guests of honor. The castle buzzed with activity, preparations underway for a grand tournament, a celebration of the king's recent victory, and a demonstration of his power. The tournament, however, was more than just a spectacle. It was a stage, a carefully orchestrated event designed to flush out any remaining dissent and to solidify the king's authority. Catherine and Tristan found themselves caught in a whirlwind of courtly intrigue. They were treated with respect, even deference, but they also sensed the underlying tension, the watchful eyes, the whispers that followed them wherever they went. Thomas, Catherine's brother, was bewildered by the turn of events. He had been utterly oblivious to Markham's treachery, his ambition blinding him to the truth. He was now both ashamed of his naivete and fearful of the king's wrath. I don't understand," he stammered, his face pale and drawn. "Markham was my friend, my advisor. I trusted him." Catherine felt a pang of pity for her brother. He was a weak man, easily manipulated, but he was not inherently evil. "You were deceived, Thomas," she said gently, "as were many others." Markham was a master of deception. Tristan, meanwhile, was preparing for the tournament. He was not required to participate, but he chose to do so, seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate his loyalty to the king and to regain his honor in the eyes of the court. He spent hours in the training yard, honing his skills with sword and lance, his movements fluid and powerful, his body a testament to years of discipline. Catherine watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She knew he was a skilled warrior, but she also knew the dangers of the tournament, the risk of injury, even death. The day of the tournament arrived, a spectacle of color and pageantry. The stands were filled with nobles and commoners alike, their cheers and jeers echoing across the field. The knights, clad in shining armor, their banners fluttering in the breeze, paraded before the king, a display of chivalry and martial prowess. Tristan rode out onto the field, his armor gleaming in the sunlight, his family crest, a silver falcon on a field of blue, emblazoned on his shield. He looked magnificent, a true knight, his presence commanding respect and admiration. Catherine watched from the royal box, her heart pounding with a mixture of pride and fear. She saw Markham's allies among the spectators, their faces grim, their eyes filled with hatred. She knew they were waiting, watching, hoping for Tristan to fail, to fall. The tournament began, a series of justs and melees, a test of skill and courage. Tristan fought with a fierce determination, unseating opponent after opponent, his lance striking true, his sword flashing in the sunlight. But the tournament was not just a test of martial skill. It was also a battle of wits, a game of deception. Tristan's opponents, many of them former allies of Markham, were not fighting fair. They used underhanded tactics, illegal maneuvers, attempting to injure him, to discredit him. In one particularly brutal joust, Tristan's opponent, a hulking knight known for his ruthlessness, aimed his lance not at Tristan's shield, but at his head. Tristan managed to deflect the blow, but he was unseated, falling heavily to the ground. Catherine gasped, her heart leaping to her throat. She saw the knight raise his sword, preparing to deliver a killing blow. But before he could strike, another knight intervened, riding between Tristan and his attacker, forcing him to back down. It was Sir Callan, a knight renowned for his honor and integrity, a man who had been a friend of Tristan's father. He had seen the foul play, and he would not stand for it. The crowd roared its approval, their cheers drowning out the jeers of Markham's supporters. The king, witnessing the scene, rose from his seat, his face filled with anger. He ordered the tournament to be halted and the offending knight to be brought before him. Tristan, bruised but unbowed, rose to his feet, his gaze meeting Catherine's. He gave her a reassuring smile, a silent promise that he was all right. The tournament of treachery had exposed not only the remaining conspirators, but also the true knights, those who valued honor above all else. The field was cleared, but the battle was far from over. The king's justice would be swift and final. A hush fell over the stands, a collective breath held in anticipation. Chapter 10. A Dance with Deception. Following the tumultuous events of the tournament, the king summoned Tristan and Catherine to a private audience. The atmosphere in the royal chambers was charged with a mixture of triumph and lingering suspicion. The king, a stern but just ruler, sat upon his throne, his gaze sweeping over them with an intensity that made Catherine's breath catch in her throat. "Sir Tristan," the king began, his voice resonating with authority, "you have rendered a great service to the crown. Your bravery and your loyalty have been proven beyond doubt." Tristan bowed his head. "Thank you, your majesty. I am but a humble servant of the realm." The king nodded, then turned his attention to Catherine. "Lady Catherine, you too have played a crucial role in uncovering this conspiracy. Your courage and your intelligence are to be commended." Catherine curtsied deeply. "I did only what was necessary, your majesty, to protect my family and to serve justice." The king smiled, a rare and fleeting expression. "Indeed. and you have done so admirably." He paused, then added, "But the matter is not yet fully resolved. There are still those who harbor sympathies for the old regime, those who may seek to undermine my rule." He gestured towards a table where a map of the kingdom lay spread out, marked with various symbols and annotations. "We have identified several key figures who were involved in Markham's plot, but there are others, lurking in the shadows, whose allegiances remain unclear." The king pointed to a specific region on the map, a cluster of castles and fortified towns bordering the northern frontier. "This area, the Marches, is of particular concern. It is a volatile region, prone to rebellion, and it is ruled by several powerful lords whose loyalty is questionable." He looked at Tristan and Catherine, his gaze intense. "I need you to go to the Marches, to infiltrate the courts of these lords, to gather information, to identify any remaining threats to the crown." It was a dangerous mission, a dance with deception that could cost them their lives. They would be entering enemy territory, surrounded by potential spies and assassins. Tristan and Catherine exchanged a look. They knew the risks, but they also knew their duty. "We will do as you command, Your Majesty," Tristan said, his voice firm. "We will not fail you," Catherine added, her resolve hardening. The king nodded, satisfied. "I trust you will not. You will be given the resources you need, and you will have my full support. But you must be discreet. Your identities must remain secret, even from your own families." He handed Tristan a sealed document, bearing the royal seal. "This is your commission. It grants you the authority to act in my name, but it must be used with caution." He then gave Catherine a small, intricately crafted ring, also bearing the royal seal. "This ring will identify you to those who are loyal to me. Show it only to those you trust implicitly." They bowed their heads, accepting the king's charge. They were now his agents, his eyes and ears in the treacherous world of courtly intrigue. The following days were spent in preparation. They gathered supplies, chose disguises, and crafted cover stories. They would pose as traveling merchants, seeking to establish trade routes in the Marches. It was a plausible guise, one that would allow them to move freely and to interact with a wide range of people. As they prepared to depart, Catherine felt a familiar pang of apprehension. She was leaving Dunmere again, leaving behind the safety and comfort of her home, venturing into the unknown. But she was not alone. She had Tristan by her side, and she had a newfound sense of purpose, a determination to fight for justice, to protect the realm. Before they left, Tristan took Catherine aside. He pulled out a small, velvet pouch and opened. There was her locket. He carefully opened the locket. Her miniature portrait of him was still intact. "I retrieved this." Catherine reached out and gently removed the locket from his open palm, running her finger along the edge. "I thought I had lost you this." Catherine stammered. Tristan reached out and cupped her cheek. "Neither, my lady." They embraced. They left Dunmere under the cover of darkness, their horses' hooves muffled by the soft earth. They rode towards the Marches, towards the unknown, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The dance with deception had begun. The road ahead was dark, but they were not alone. They had each other, and they had a mission. The fate of the kingdom, perhaps, rested on their shoulders. The wind whispered through the trees, a silent omen of the challenges to come. Chapter 11. The Lion and the Lamb. The Marches were a stark contrast to the familiar landscapes of Dunmere. Rugged hills, dense forests, and treacherous bogs dominated the terrain, a wild and untamed land that mirrored the turbulent politics of its ruling lords. The air was thick with suspicion, every stranger viewed as a potential threat, every smile a possible mask for deceit. Tristan and Catherine, disguised as merchants, adopted the names Master Thomas and Mistress Catherine, careful to conceal their true identities and their mission. They traveled from castle to castle, town to town, offering their wares silks, spices, and other luxury goods while subtly gathering information, listening to whispers, observing the dynamics of the local courts. Their first destination was Castle Blackwood, the seat of Lord Gareth, a powerful and enigmatic figure known for his unpredictable nature and his fierce independence. Lord Gareth was rumored to be a staunch supporter of the old king, and he had never fully reconciled himself to the new regime. They arrived at Castle Blackwood under a gray, overcast sky, the imposing stone walls of the castle looming before them like a predator waiting to pounce. They were greeted with suspicion by the guards, their goods searched thoroughly, their identities questioned. "We are but humble merchants," Tristan explained, his voice calm and reassuring, seeking to establish trade with Lord Gareth. "We have heard of his prosperity, his generosity." The guards, unconvinced, escorted them to the castle's great hall, where Lord Gareth held court. The hall was a vast, echoing chamber, decorated with tapestries depicting scenes of battle and hunting, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and roasted meat. Lord Gareth sat upon a raised dais, his presence dominating the room. He was a large, powerfully built man, his face weathered and scarred, his eyes sharp and piercing. He wore a simple tunic of dark wool, a heavy silver chain around his neck, a symbol of his authority. He listened to their presentation with a stony silence, his gaze fixed on them, assessing, judging. Catherine felt a shiver of apprehension run down her spine. This was a dangerous man, a lion in his own den. "You claim to be merchants," Gareth said, his voice a low growl. "But your hands are not those of laborers. Your speech is too refined. Who are you really?" Tristan met his gaze unflinchingly. "We are who we say we are, my lord. We have traveled far, seeking to establish trade with your esteemed lordship. We have goods of the highest quality, goods that would grace even the royal table." Gareth remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowed. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Very well, Master Thomas," he said. "I will allow you to present your wares. But be warned, I am not easily fooled. If I discover you are not who you claim to be, the consequences will be severe." Tristan and Catherine were granted permission to stay at Castle Blackwood, but they were under constant surveillance. Guards followed them everywhere, their every move watched, their every conversation overheard. They set up their stall in the castle courtyard, displaying their goods, attracting the attention of the castle inhabitants. Catherine, playing the role of the charming merchant's wife, engaged in conversation with the ladies of the court, subtly gathering information, listening for any hints of disloyalty, any whispers of rebellion. She discovered that Lord Gareth, despite his outward appearance of strength, was facing challenges to his authority. He had a young wife, Lady Alara, a beautiful and ambitious woman who was rumored to be unhappy with her marriage. She was also said to be involved in a secret affair with one of Gareth's knights, a dashing young man named Sir Roland. This information, Catherine realized, could be valuable. A divided court, a lord weakened by internal strife, was more vulnerable to manipulation, more likely to reveal its secrets. She shared her findings with Tristan, meeting him in secret in the castle stables, the only place where they could be relatively sure of privacy. "We need to exploit this weakness," Catherine said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to get close to Lady Alara, gain her trust, perhaps even use her to gain access to Lord Gareth's private chambers." Tristan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a risky plan, Catherine, but it might be our only chance to uncover the truth about Gareth's allegiances." They decided to approach Lady Alara, offering her gifts, flattering her beauty, subtly playing on her discontent. Catherine, with her charm and her wit, managed to gain the lady's confidence, becoming a regular visitor to her chambers, a confidant in her secrets. Lady Alara, it turned out, was not just unhappy, she was also afraid. She knew of Gareth's suspicions, his ruthless nature, and she feared for her life. She was a lamb caught in a lion's den, desperate for a way out. Catherine saw an opportunity, a chance to turn Alara into an ally, a source of information. But she also knew that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could have deadly consequences. The lion and the lamb were dancing a precarious dance, and the outcome was far from certain. The castle walls seemed to close in, the shadows deepening. Chapter 12. Echoes of War. Catherine's carefully cultivated friendship with Lady Alara began to yield fruit, albeit fragile and potentially poisonous. Alara, desperate for a confidant and increasingly fearful of her husband, started to reveal snippets of information, guarded whispers about Lord Gareth's dealings and his true sentiments towards the king. He despises the new king, Alara confided one evening, her voice trembling, her eyes darting nervously towards the door of her chambers. He calls him a usurper, a weakling who stole the throne from its rightful heir. Catherine, feigning surprise, pressed further. But he has shown no outward signs of disloyalty. He has hosted the king's tournaments, paid his taxes. Alara shook her head, her elaborate braids swaying. It's all a facade, Catherine. A carefully constructed lie. He is waiting for the right moment, gathering his strength, forging alliances in the shadows. Catherine learned that Gareth was in secret communication with other lords in the Marches, lords who shared his resentment towards the new king. They were plotting, not an open rebellion, but a slow, insidious undermining of the king's authority, a campaign of sabotage and disinformation. He keeps his plans hidden, Alara whispered, her hand clutching Catherine's. In a locked chest, in his private study. Only he has the key. That chest, Catherine realized, was the key to everything. It likely contained the evidence they needed to expose Gareth's treachery and to bring him to justice. But gaining access to it would be a perilous undertaking. She shared her findings with Tristan, their clandestine meetings becoming more frequent, more urgent. They met in the dead of night, in the deserted gardens, the cold night air a stark reminder of the dangers they faced. We need to get that key, Tristan, Catherine said, her voice low and determined. It's the only way to prove Gareth's guilt. Tristan nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. It won't be easy. Gareth is always guarded, always suspicious. And his study is heavily protected. They considered various options, each more risky than the last. They could try to steal the key from Gareth directly, but that was almost impossible. He never let it out of his sight, wearing it on a chain around his neck, even when he slept. They could try to bribe one of Gareth's servants, but that was too unreliable. The servants were fiercely loyal to their lord, and the risk of betrayal was too high. Finally, they settled on a daring, almost reckless plan. They would use Lady Alara as their unwitting accomplice. She is desperate to escape Gareth, Catherine said. She fears for her life. If we can convince her that we can help her, that we can offer her a way out, she might be willing to help us. It was a gamble, a manipulation of a vulnerable woman, but they saw no other choice. They were fighting a war, a silent war of espionage and intrigue, and they had to use every weapon at their disposal. Catherine approached Alara, carefully crafting her words, playing on her fears, her hopes. She told her that she and Tristan were not merchants, but agents of a powerful faction, working to restore the old king's rightful heir to the throne. We can help you escape, Alara, Catherine said, her voice soft and persuasive. We can offer you protection, a new life, far away from Gareth's tyranny. Alara, desperate and vulnerable, was swayed by Catherine's words. She agreed to help them, to steal the key from Gareth while he slept. The plan was set in motion. One moonless night, while Gareth lay in a drunken stupor, Alara crept into his chambers, her heart pounding with fear. She carefully slipped the key from around his neck, her hands trembling. She brought the key to Catherine, her face pale and drawn. I have it, she whispered. But please, you must get me out of here. He will kill me if he finds out. Catherine took the key, her own heart racing. She reassured Alara, promising her that they would keep their word, that they would help her escape. Tristan, meanwhile, was waiting outside Gareth's study. He used the key to unlock the door, slipping inside, the darkness swallowing him whole. He found the chest, a heavy, iron-bound box, locked with a complex mechanism. He opened the chest, his hands trembling with anticipation. Inside, he found a trove of documents, letters, maps, and coded messages, all detailing Gareth's treasonous plots. He carefully gathered the documents, placing them in a satchel, his mind racing. But as he was about to leave, He heard a noise, a soft footfall outside the door. He quickly extinguished his candle, plunging the room into darkness. He held his breath, listening. The door creaked open, and a figure entered the room, silhouetted against the faint light from the hallway. It was Lord Gareth, his eyes narrowed, his hand on the hilt of his sword. Tristan knew he was trapped. He had been discovered. The echoes of war, once distant, were now deafening. The room was silent, save for the heavy breathing of two men, their fates intertwined. Chapter 13. The Prisoner of Conscience. Gareth advanced, his sword drawn, the firelight glinting off the polished steel. "I knew it," he growled, his voice a low, menacing rumble. "I knew you were not what you seemed.
Spies.
Traitors." Tristan remained silent, his hand gripping the satchel containing the incriminating documents. He knew he couldn't fight his way out. Gareth was a formidable warrior, and the room was too small, too confined.
Who sent you?
Gareth demanded, his eyes narrowed. The king? Or someone else? Someone with designs on my lands, my title? Tristan decided to play for time, to try to bluff his way out. "We are but merchants, my lord. We were curious. We heard rumors of your wealth, your treasures." Gareth laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You expect me to believe that? You, with your noble bearing, your educated speech? You are no merchant, and I am no fool." He lunged forward, his sword whistling through the air. Tristan dodged the blow, narrowly avoiding the sharp blade. He stumbled back, his hand reaching for his own sword, but he knew it was a futile gesture. Gareth pressed his attack, forcing Tristan back against the wall. "Tell me who you are," he roared, "or I will run you through." Just as Gareth was about to deliver the final blow, a voice cried out from the doorway.
"Stop."
"Father, please." It was Lady Alara, her face pale and distraught, her eyes wide with fear. She rushed forward, placing herself between Gareth and Tristan. "He is not a spy, father," she pleaded. He is my lover. We were meeting in secret." Gareth froze, his sword hovering in mid-air. He stared at Alara, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What?" he growled. "What are you saying?" Alara, emboldened by desperation, continued her lie. "We are in love, father. We have been meeting in secret for months. He came here tonight to see me." Gareth lowered his sword, his gaze shifting from Alara to Tristan, his mind struggling to comprehend this new information. "Is this true?" he demanded of Tristan. Tristan, seizing the opportunity, nodded his head. "Yes, my lord. It is true. I am in love with your daughter. I came here to be with her." Gareth remained silent for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and confusion. He didn't fully believe them, but he couldn't be sure. His daughter's intervention had cast doubt on his initial suspicions. "Get out," he growled, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. "Get out of my castle, both of you, and never return." Tristan and Alara wasted no time. They fled the study, leaving behind the satchel containing the incriminating documents. Tristan knew they had lost the evidence, but they had gained their freedom, at least for the moment. They made their way back to their chambers, their hearts pounding, their minds racing. They knew they had to leave Castle Blackwood immediately, before Gareth discovered the truth. But as they were preparing to depart, they were intercepted by Gareth's guards. They were arrested, separated, and thrown into the castle dungeons. Tristan found himself in a cold, damp cell, the darkness absolute, the silence broken only by the dripping of water and the scurrying of rats. He was a prisoner, his mission compromised, his fate uncertain. He knew that Gareth would interrogate him, torture him, perhaps even kill him. But he was determined to remain silent, to protect Catherine, to protect the king. He thought of Catherine, of her bravery, her intelligence, her unwavering loyalty. He wondered where she was, what had happened to her. He hoped she was safe, that she had managed to escape. He clung to the memory of her smile, her touch, the love that had blossomed between them amidst the danger and deception. It was that love, that hope, that gave him the strength to endure, to face the darkness with courage. He was prisoner of conscience. A choice to remain silent or speak his truth. The dungeon was cold, but his resolve was a burning fire. Chapter 14. A bargain with fate. Catherine, meanwhile, had been confined to a separate cell, equally cold and damp, but slightly less oppressive than Tristan's. She had witnessed the confrontation between Tristan, Gareth, and Alara, and she had seen them being led away by the guards. She knew that Tristan had sacrificed himself to protect her, to give her a chance to escape. She spent the first few hours in a state of panic, her mind racing, her heart pounding with fear. She imagined the worst, picturing Tristan being tortured, killed. But as the initial shock wore off, she began to think more clearly, to formulate a plan. She knew she couldn't simply wait for rescue. She had to take action, to find a way to escape, to help Tristan. She examined her cell, searching for any weakness, any opportunity. The walls were solid stone, the door heavy and locked. There was a small, barred window high up on the wall, but it was too small to climb through. She noticed a loose stone in the floor, near the corner of the cell. She pried it loose, revealing a small cavity beneath. It was empty, but it gave her an idea. She began to work on the surrounding stones, using the loose stone as a tool, slowly, painstakingly, chipping away at the mortar. It was arduous work, her hands raw and bleeding, her body aching with fatigue. But she persevered, driven by a desperate hope, a determination to survive, to save Tristan. After what seemed like an eternity, she managed to loosen several more stones, creating a small opening in the floor. It was still too small to crawl through, but it was large enough to see into the cell below. To her surprise, she saw a figure huddled in the corner of the cell below. It was Lady Alara. Catherine called out to her, softly at first, then louder. Alara looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Catherine?" she whispered. "Is that you?" "Yes," Catherine replied. "It's me. Are you all right?" Alara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Catherine. I didn't mean for this to happen." Catherine realized that Alara had been betrayed by her father, that her lie to save Tristan had been used against her. Gareth had imprisoned both of them, his own daughter included. "It's not your fault, Alara," Catherine said. "You were trying to help. We were both deceived." They spoke for a long time, sharing their stories, their fears, their hopes. Catherine learned that Alara had always been a prisoner in her own home, trapped by her father's tyranny, forced into a marriage she didn't want. Catherine saw an opportunity, a chance to forge an alliance. She proposed a daring plan. "We can help each other, Alara," she said. "We can escape together. But we need to work together." Alara, desperate and with nothing to lose, agreed. Catherine explained her plan, a risky and improbable scheme that relied on Alara's knowledge of the castle, her access to certain keys and passages. Alara, using her position as Gareth's daughter, managed to obtain a key to her own cell and, crucially, a key to a secret passage that led from the dungeons to the outside of the castle walls. This passage, known only to a select few, was used in times of siege or emergency. Under the cover of darkness, they put their plan into action. Alara unlocked her cell, then Catherine's. They crept through the dark, silent corridors of the dungeon, their hearts pounding with fear. They reached the entrance to the secret passage, a narrow, winding tunnel that descended deep into the earth. They navigated the passage, their way lit only by a small lantern that Alara had managed to obtain. As they were nearing the exit, they heard voices, footsteps approaching. They quickly extinguished the lantern, plunging themselves into darkness. They held their breath, listening. It was Gareth, accompanied by several guards. He was searching for them, his voice filled with rage. "Find them," he roared. "They cannot have escaped. Search every corner of the castle." Catherine and Alara remained hidden, their bodies pressed against the cold stone walls of the passage. They waited, their hearts pounding, until the voices faded away. They continued their journey, finally reaching the exit, a small, concealed opening in the castle wall, hidden by thick bushes. They emerged into the cool night air, their lungs filling with the sweet scent of freedom. They had escaped, but they were not safe. They were fugitives, hunted by Gareth, with nowhere to go. They had made a bargain with fate, and the price was yet to be determined. The forest loomed, a dark and uncertain refuge. Chapter 15. The Unveiling. Catherine and Alara found themselves outside the castle walls, the vast, dark expanse of the forest stretching before them. They were free from their immediate captivity, but their situation remained precarious. They were hunted, with limited resources and no clear plan. "We need to get to the Abbey," Catherine said, her voice low and urgent. "It's the only safe place we can go." Alara nodded, her face pale and drawn. She was still shaken by her escape, by her father's betrayal. "But it's days away, and the forest is dangerous." They knew they couldn't travel openly. Gareth's men would be searching for them, and the roads were likely patrolled. They had to stick to the less traveled paths, to the shadows, relying on their wits and their courage to survive. They began their journey, their steps hurried, their senses alert. They navigated by the stars, the moon their only guide, the rustling of leaves and the hooting of owls their constant companions. They faced numerous challenges, their path fraught with danger. They encountered wild animals, treacherous terrain, and the constant threat of discovery. They shared what little food they had managed to scavenge, their hunger a gnawing reminder of their vulnerability. But despite the hardships, they persevered, their bond strengthening with each passing day. They had become allies, sisters in adversity, their shared experiences forging a connection that transcended their different backgrounds. Catherine, drawing on her knowledge of the land, guided them through the forest, avoiding the main roads and settlements. She used her skills as a huntress, learned from her father, to find food and water, to keep them alive. Alara, despite her initial fear, proved to be resourceful and resilient. She used her knowledge of herbs and plants, learned from the castle healer, to treat their injuries, to ward off illness. As they journeyed, Catherine began to think about Tristan, about his imprisonment. She knew she had to find a way to help him, to rescue him from Gareth's clutches. But she also knew that she couldn't do it alone. She decided to reveal her true identity to Alara, to tell her the whole story, to enlist her help in a larger plan. One evening, as they sat huddled around a small fire, Catherine took a deep breath and began to speak. She told Alara about her father's murder, about Tristan's false accusation, about their mission for the king, about the conspiracy in the marches. Alara listened intently, her eyes widening with each revelation. She was shocked, horrified, but also intrigued. "So, you are not a merchant's wife," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You are Lady Catherine of Dunmere, and Sir Tristan is a knight, working for the king." Catherine nodded.
Yes.
"And we need your help, Alara. We need to expose Gareth's treachery, to bring him to justice. And we need to rescue Tristan." Alara, despite her initial hesitation, agreed. She had come to trust Catherine, to admire her courage, her determination. And she had her own reasons for wanting to see her father brought down. "He is a monster, Catherine," she said, her voice filled with bitterness. "He has ruined my life, destroyed my happiness. I will help you, in any way I can." Together, they formulated a plan. They would continue their journey to the Abbey, seeking the help of Abbess Eleanor. They would then send word to the king, informing him of Gareth's treachery and of Tristan's imprisonment. They would also seek the help of other loyal lords in the marches, those who were not part of Gareth's conspiracy, to raise an army to challenge him. It was a daring, ambitious plan, but it was their only hope. They had to fight back, to reclaim their lives, to restore justice to the realm. After days of arduous travel, they finally reached the Abbey, their bodies weary, their spirits drained. They were greeted by the nuns, their faces filled with concern. Catherine was reunited with her aunt, Abbess Eleanor, who embraced her warmly, relief flooding her features. "Catherine, child, you are safe," she exclaimed. "We have been so worried. We received word of Gareth's actions, of Tristan's imprisonment." Catherine quickly explained their situation, their escape, their plan. Abbess Eleanor listened intently, her expression grave. "This is a dangerous undertaking, Catherine," she said. "But it is a necessary one. We must stop Gareth before he can do any more harm." Abbess Eleanor immediately set about contacting the king, sending a messenger with a detailed account of Gareth's treachery and of Tristan's plight. She also sent word to several loyal lords in the marches, those she knew could be trusted, asking for their support. The unveiling was complete. The truth was out, the battle lines drawn. They had set in motion a chain of events that would determine the fate of the kingdom. The abbey bells chimed, a call to arms, a prayer for victory. Chapter 16. Threads of Destiny. The response from the king was swift and decisive. He ordered a royal army to be dispatched to the marches, under the command of Sir Callan, the honorable knight who had intervened on Tristan's behalf during the tournament. He also sent a decree demanding Gareth's surrender and Tristan's immediate release. The loyal lords of the marches, spurred by Abbess Eleanor's plea and the king's command, began to mobilize their forces, preparing to join the royal army in a show of force against Gareth. Catherine, meanwhile, was restless. She couldn't simply wait at the abbey, while Tristan remained imprisoned, his life in danger. She wanted to be part of the action, to contribute to his rescue, to the downfall of Gareth. She pleaded with Abbess Eleanor to allow her to accompany the army, to use her knowledge of Castle Blackwood, her familiarity with its layout and its inhabitants, to aid in their efforts. Abbess Eleanor, initially reluctant, finally agreed. She knew that Catherine's determination was unwavering, her spirit indomitable. "But you must be careful, child," she warned. "Gareth is a ruthless man, and he will not hesitate to harm you." Catherine, armed with a sword and clad in light armor, disguised as a young squire, joined the ranks of the royal army as it marched towards Castle Blackwood. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, a sense of purpose and determination. The journey was arduous, the army moving swiftly through the rugged terrain of the marches. They encountered little resistance, Gareth's forces seemingly unprepared for such a swift and decisive response. As they approached Castle Blackwood, Catherine saw the imposing stone walls of the castle looming before them, a symbol of Gareth's defiance, his tyranny. She felt a surge of anger, a renewed determination to see him brought to justice. The royal army surrounded the castle, laying siege to its defenses. Sir Callan sent a herald, demanding Gareth's surrender and Tristan's release. Gareth, defiant and arrogant, refused. He believed his castle to be impregnable, his forces loyal, his position secure. "I will not surrender to the usurper king," he roared from the castle walls. "I will fight to the death." The siege began, a clash of steel and stone, a battle of wills. The royal army, with its superior numbers and its advanced weaponry, began to batter the castle walls, attempting to breach its defenses. Catherine, despite her disguise, found herself in the thick of the fighting. She used her knowledge of the castle's layout to guide the soldiers, to point out weaknesses in its defenses, to help them gain an advantage. She also searched for Tristan, her heart pounding with fear, hoping to find him alive, unharmed. She questioned captured soldiers, interrogated servants, desperately seeking any information about his whereabouts. Finally, she learned from a terrified stable boy that Tristan was being held in the castle's deepest dungeon, a notorious place of torture and despair. Catherine, fueled by a desperate hope, made her way to the dungeon, accompanied by a small group of loyal soldiers. They fought their way through the castle's inner defenses, encountering fierce resistance from Gareth's guards. They reached the dungeon, a dark and forbidding place, the air thick with the stench of decay and despair. They found Tristan, chained to the wall, his body bruised and battered, but his spirit unbroken. "Catherine?" he whispered, his voice weak, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Is that really you?" Catherine rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she unlocked his chains. "Yes, Tristan, it's me. I'm here. I'm going to get you out of here." They freed Tristan, supporting his weakened body as they made their way out of the dungeon, back towards the fighting. As they emerged into the castle courtyard, they saw that the battle was raging. The royal army had breached the castle walls, and the fighting had spilled into the inner courtyards. Gareth, seeing his defenses crumbling, his forces routed, was fighting with a desperate fury, his sword flashing in the sunlight. He saw Tristan, accompanied by Catherine, and a roar of rage escaped his lips.
You,
He bellowed. You will pay for this. He charged towards them, his sword raised, his eyes filled with hatred. Tristan, despite his weakened state, stepped forward, drawing his own sword, ready to defend himself, to defend Catherine. The threads of destiny, woven long ago, were now converging. The final confrontation was at hand. The courtyard was a stage, the players assembled, the outcome uncertain. The clash of steel echoed, a symphony of vengeance and justice. Chapter 17. The King's Decree. The clash between Tristan and Gareth was brief, but brutal. Tristan, weakened by his imprisonment, was no match for Gareth's strength and ferocity. But he fought with courage and determination, fueled by his love for Catherine and his desire for justice. Gareth pressed his attack, forcing Tristan back, his sword blows raining down upon him. Catherine watched in horror, her heart pounding with fear, her hands clenched into fists. Just as Gareth was about to deliver a killing blow, Sir Calin intervened, his sword clashing against Gareth's, deflecting the blow. This ends now, Gareth, Calin said, his voice firm and commanding. Surrender, or face the consequences. Gareth, surrounded by Calin's soldiers, his own forces defeated, realized that he was beaten. He lowered his sword, his face a mask of rage and despair. I surrender, he growled, his voice barely a whisper. The battle for Castle Blackwood was over. The royal army had triumphed, Gareth's rebellion crushed, Tristan freed. Gareth was taken prisoner, his chains heavy, his fate sealed. He would be brought before the king, to answer for his crimes, to face the consequences of his treachery. Tristan, weak but alive, was taken to the castle's infirmary, where he was treated for his injuries. Catherine remained by his side, her hand in his, her love and relief washing over him like a healing balm. As Tristan recovered, news arrived from the king. He had received Abbess Eleanor's message, and he had acted swiftly, decisively. He had ordered the arrest of the remaining conspirators in the marches, those who had been involved in Gareth's plot. He had also issued a decree, stripping Gareth of his titles and lands, declaring him a traitor to the crown. The king's decree also contained a personal message for Tristan and Catherine. He commended their bravery, their loyalty, their service to the realm. He offered them his gratitude, his protection, and his favor. He also, surprisingly, offered Tristan a new title, a new position. He appointed him Lord of Blackwood, granting him Gareth's former lands and titles, tasking him with restoring order and stability to the marches. It was a remarkable turn of events, a twist of fate that neither Tristan nor Catherine had anticipated. They had gone from being fugitives, hunted and persecuted, to being honored and rewarded, entrusted with a position of power and responsibility. Tristan, initially hesitant, accepted the king's offer. He saw it as an opportunity to serve the realm, to bring justice and peace to the troubled region of the Marches. He also saw it as a chance to build a new life with Catherine, a life free from the shadows of the past, a life filled with hope and promise. Catherine, overjoyed at Tristan's recovery and his new position, pledged her support, her love, her unwavering loyalty. She would stand by his side, as his wife, his partner, his equal, helping him to rule Blackwood, to build a better future for its people. Lady Alara was given safe passage. The king, in his decree, offered her freedom and protection, allowing her to choose her own path, to forge her own destiny. She has decided to join her aunt, Abbess Eleanor, at the abbey. The king's decree was a turning point, a moment of reckoning. Justice had been served, the guilty punished, the innocent rewarded. The realm was safe, the conspiracy crushed, the future secured. But the scars of the past remained. The memories of loss and pain that was endured lingered. Tristan and Catherine knew that their journey was far from over. They had challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. But they were no longer alone. They had each other, and they had the support of the king, the loyalty of the people. They would face the future together, with courage, with determination, with love. The king's decree was read aloud in the courtyard, a proclamation of hope and renewal. Chapter 18. A Love Forged in Fire. With Gareth defeated and the marches pacified, Tristan and Catherine began the arduous task of rebuilding Blackwood, both the castle and the lives of its people. The scars of Gareth's tyranny ran deep, and it would take time, patience, and unwavering dedication to heal the wounds and restore trust. Tristan, as the new Lord of Blackwood, proved to be a just and compassionate ruler. He abolished Gareth's oppressive laws, reduced taxes, and encouraged trade and agriculture. He listened to the concerns of his people, addressing their grievances, striving to create a society based on fairness and equality. Catherine, as his wife and partner, played a crucial role in this transformation. She used her intelligence, her compassion, and her knowledge of courtly life to advise Tristan, to guide him, to help him navigate the complex challenges of leadership. She also established schools and hospitals, cared for the poor and the sick, and fostered a sense of community among the people of Blackwood. Their love, forged in the fires of adversity, blossomed and grew stronger with each passing day. They had faced danger, betrayal, and loss together, and their shared experiences had created a bond that was unbreakable. They found solace in each other's arms, their love a refuge from the storms of the world, a source of strength and inspiration. They were married in a simple, yet beautiful ceremony in the Abbey of St. Seraphina, Abbess Eleanor officiating. The nuns, who had sheltered them, who had helped them in their time of need, sang hymns of joy and thanksgiving. It was a celebration of love, of resilience, of new beginnings. Their life at Blackwood was not without its challenges. There were still those who resented Tristan's rule, those who clung to the old ways, those who whispered of rebellion. But Tristan, with Catherine's support, dealt with these challenges swiftly and decisively, always striving to be just and fair, to maintain peace and order. They also faced personal challenges, the lingering scars of their past, the memories of loss and pain. Tristan struggled with the guilt of his perceived betrayal, the weight of his responsibilities. Catherine wrestled with the memories of her father's murder, the fear of losing Tristan again. But they faced these challenges together, their love a constant source of strength and comfort. They talked openly about their fears, their doubts, their hopes, their dreams. They found solace in each other's presence, their shared vulnerability a testament to their deep trust and understanding. One evening, as they stood on the castle walls, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Tristan turned to Catherine, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "I never thought I would find happiness again," he said, his voice soft and tender. After everything that happened, I believed my life was over. But you, Catherine, you gave me a second chance. You showed me that love can conquer even the darkest of shadows." Catherine smiled, her heart overflowing with love. "And you, Tristan, you taught me the meaning of courage, of resilience, of forgiveness. You showed me that even in the face of betrayal, hope can endure." They embraced, their love a beacon in the twilight, a promise of a future filled with joy and peace. They had built a life together, a life forged in fire, tempered by adversity, strengthened by love. They ruled Blackwood wisely and justly, their reign marked by prosperity and peace. They became known as the Lion and the Lamb, Tristan the strong and protective leader, Catherine the compassionate and nurturing heart of their domain. Their love story became a legend, whispered throughout the marches, a testament to the enduring power of love, of forgiveness, of second chances. It was a story of two souls, scarred by the past, who found healing and redemption in each other's arms. The castle, once a symbol of oppression, was now a beacon of hope. Their love was the light that guided them. Chapter 19. The Heart's Reckoning. Years passed, and Blackwood flourished under the just and compassionate rule of Tristan and Catherine. Their love had deepened, their bond unbreakable, their partnership a model for all who knew them. They had children, 2 sons and a daughter, who brought joy and laughter to the castle, filling its halls with a sense of life and renewal. But the past, like a persistent shadow, occasionally cast its darkness upon their lives. The memories of loss, of betrayal, of the struggles they had endured, would sometimes resurface, bringing with them a wave of sadness and regret. One autumn evening, as a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil in her heart, Catherine found herself in the castle library, seeking solace among the ancient tomes and dusty scrolls. She had been feeling restless, a sense of unease settling upon her, triggered by a letter she had received from Abbess Eleanor. The letter spoke of a growing unrest in a distant corner of the kingdom, rumors of a new rebellion brewing, whispers of a pretender to the throne. It was a faint echo of the past, a reminder of the dangers that still lurked, the fragility of peace. As she sat by the fire, lost in thought, Tristan entered the library, his face etched with concern. He had noticed her disquiet, her withdrawal, and he knew that something was troubling her. "Catherine," he said, his voice soft and gentle, "what is wrong? You seem distant." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and apprehension. She handed him the letter from Abbess Eleanor. "It's the past, Tristan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's coming back to haunt us." Tristan read the letter, his brow furrowing in concern. He understood her fears, her anxieties. He too had felt the weight of the past, the constant threat of disruption, the ever-present danger of losing everything they had built together. He sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. "We have faced the past before, Catherine," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "And we have overcome it. We will face this too, together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, seeking comfort in his presence, in his strength. "I know, Tristan, but I can't help but worry. We have so much to lose now. Our children, our home, our peace." He tightened his grip on her hand, his love a silent promise of protection, of unwavering support. "We will protect what we have, Catherine. We will not let anyone take it from us." They spent the evening talking, sharing their fears, their hopes, their plans. They decided to take precautions, to strengthen the castle's defenses, to increase patrols, to be vigilant. They also decided to reach out to their allies, to seek their support, to prepare for any eventuality. But beyond the practical measures, they also sought solace in each other, in their love. They reaffirmed their commitment to each other, their unwavering devotion, their determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. As the storm raged outside, they found refuge in each other's arms, their love a beacon in the darkness, a source of strength and comfort. They knew that the future was uncertain, that dangers still lurked, but they were no longer afraid. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The heart's reckoning was a constant process, a weighing of fears and hopes, of doubts and certainties. But their love, forged in fire, tempered by adversity, was their anchor, their guiding star, their unwavering truth. It was their love that would carry them through the storm. They knew this was just a ripple, the real battles were within. The fire crackled, a comforting counterpoint to the howling wind. Chapter 20. Dawn of Redemption. The rumors of rebellion proved to be unfounded, a fleeting storm that dissipated as quickly as it had arisen. The pretender to the throne, a weak and ineffectual figure, failed to garner any significant support, and his feeble attempt to challenge the king's authority was swiftly crushed. But the incident served as a reminder of the fragility of peace, the constant need for vigilance, the ever-present threat of disruption. It also prompted Tristan and Catherine to reflect on their lives, on their journey, on the lessons they had learned. They realized that true peace was not simply the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, of compassion, of understanding. It was a state of being, a way of life, a constant striving to create a better world for themselves, for their children, for their people. They rededicated themselves to their mission, to ruling Blackwood wisely and justly, to fostering a sense of community, to promoting peace and prosperity throughout the marches. They became even more involved in the lives of their people, listening to their concerns, addressing their needs, striving to create a society where everyone felt valued, respected, and protected. They also made a conscious effort to heal the remaining wounds of the past, to reconcile with those who had been their enemies, to forgive those who had wronged them. They reached out to Lord Gareth's former allies, offering them amnesty, inviting them to join their efforts to build a better future. Some accepted their offer, humbled by their generosity, eager to put the past behind them. Others remained defiant, clinging to their old grievances, their hatred. But Tristan and Catherine did not waver in their commitment to peace, to reconciliation, to forgiveness. They also sought to strengthen their ties with the king, to reaffirm their loyalty, to offer their support in his efforts to maintain peace and stability throughout the realm. They traveled to the royal court, renewing their oaths of fealty, participating in the councils of state, sharing their wisdom and experience. The king, recognizing their wisdom and their unwavering commitment to justice, appointed them as his advisors, entrusting them with greater responsibilities, seeking their counsel on matters of state. Tristan and Catherine embraced their new roles, using their influence to promote peace, to advocate for the rights of the common people, to work towards a more just and equitable society. As the years passed, they witnessed the fruits of their labor. Blackwood prospered, its people thrived, its reputation as a haven of peace and justice spread throughout the realm. Their children grew into strong and compassionate individuals, inheriting their parents' values, their commitment to service, their love for their people. Tristan and Catherine, their hair streaked with silver, their faces etched with the lines of time and experience, found a deep sense of satisfaction in their accomplishments, in the legacy they had created. They had faced the darkness, they had overcome adversity, they had found love and redemption. One evening, as they sat on the castle walls, watching the sun set over the rolling hills of the Marches, Catherine turned to Tristan, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "We did it, Tristan," she said, her voice soft and tender. "We built a better world." Tristan smiled, his heart overflowing with love. "We did it together, Catherine. And it was all worth it." They embraced, their love a timeless testament to the power of forgiveness, of resilience, of the human spirit. The dawn of redemption had broken, casting its golden light upon their lives, upon their kingdom, upon their legacy. The past was a memory, the future a promise, and the present a gift. Their love was the thread that connected them all. The sunset was a masterpiece, painted across the sky, a reflection of their enduring love. Epilogue. Many years later, long after Tristan and Catherine had passed from this world, their legacy lived on. Blackwood remained a beacon of peace and prosperity, its people remembering their beloved lord and lady with fondness and respect. Their story, passed down through generations, became a legend, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and redemption. Their children and their children's children continued their work, ruling Blackwood wisely and justly, upholding the values that Tristan and Catherine had instilled in them. The castle, once a symbol of oppression, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, light can prevail. The Abbey of St. Seraphina, where Catherine had found refuge and where she and Tristan had been married, continued to be a place of sanctuary, a center of learning and spiritual guidance. Abbess Eleanor's wisdom and compassion were remembered, her legacy carried on by the generations of nuns who followed in her footsteps. The Marches, once a turbulent and divided region, became a land of peace and unity, its lords and ladies working together to maintain order and stability, inspired by the example of Tristan and Catherine. The echoes of war faded, replaced by the sounds of laughter, of commerce, of life flourishing. And so, the story of the Lion and the Lamb, of Sir Tristan de Clare and Lady Catherine of Dunmere, became a timeless tale, whispered throughout the kingdom, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, loss, and adversity, love can conquer all, forgiveness can heal all, and redemption can be found by all. Their love story served a purpose. It was more than just a romantic story. It taught her the importance of truth, the importance of looking beneath the surface. Catherine initially misjudged Tristan. Then both were tested in unimaginable ways. Their names are found in stone. Their legend in the hearts of the people, forever.
The end.